If I asked you to name Kylie Minogue's comeback album, most of you would say Fever. And I get it. That's the one that went global. That's Can't Get You Out of My Head. That's the album that conquered America and turned her into one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. But here's what I think people get wrong about Fever. It wasn't the comeback. It was the victory lap. The actual comeback, the album that rebuilt the foundation, re-earned the trust of her audience, and proved she still had the authority to command a dance floor, was Light Years. And without it, Fever doesn't exist. This is the full breakdown of how Kylie Minogue abandoned the indie underground, signed a do-or-die deal with Parlophone Records, and turned a 50-pence pair of charity shop hot pants into the most important record of her career. Not the most famous, but the most important. This is the story of Light Years. So why did Kylie need to rebuild at all? What had gone so wrong that a future global pop domination required an entire album just to lay the groundwork? The late 90s were a confusing time to be a Kylie fan. She'd spent the last few years operating under the media-appointed moniker Indie Kylie, collaborating with the Manic Street Preachers, experimenting with trip-hop, and releasing her deeply personal, divisive Impossible Princess album. Creatively, it was a fascinating pivot that let her flex genuine songwriting muscle and take control of her own narrative. Commercially, it was a disaster. The general public simply didn't know what to do with a brooding, alternative Kylie Minogue trying to navigate the Britpop hangover. The UK charts at the dawn of the year 2000 were going through a shift. Radio and Saturday morning TV was aggressively chasing youth culture, hammering the American teen pop explosion of Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Christina Aguilera, alongside domestic heavyweights like Steps, Billie Piper, and S Club 7. The top 40 was shiny, heavily choreographed, and decidedly teenage. In that environment, a pop star hitting her early 30s was treated by most A&R executives like a hot potato. Deconstruction Records had quietly dropped her following the lackluster sales of her 1994 and 1997 indie excursions. The tabloids, never ones to miss a chance to kick a national treasure when she's down, gleefully declared her recording career finished. The prevailing thought was that Kylie had simply missed the boat for the new millennium. Pop music is notoriously brutal. Once you lose the momentum of the mainstream, clawing your way back to the dead center of the conversation is nearly impossible. The standard trajectory for an artist in her position was to become a heritage act, permanently relegated to 90s revival weekends at Butlins, surviving entirely on the goodwill of I Should Be So Lucky. That's the gap that Light Years had to close. Not just a commercial gap, trust gap between Kylie and the mainstream, between Kylie and the dance floor, and between Kylie and the audience that would eventually make Fever a global phenomenon. But Kylie had something that most people don't give her credit for. She understood her own pop architecture better than anyone. She recognized that the intense introspection of her mid-90s phase, while personally necessary to prove her artistic autonomy, had alienated her core constituency. The dance floors had been left without their primary source of joy. The gay clubs that had steadfastly supported her during the wilderness years when the mainstream had turned its back needed a proper soundtrack for the new decade. She didn't need to completely reinvent the wheel. She needed to remember exactly how to spin it. And she needed a label willing to bankroll the whole thing. The industry assumed Kylie was scrambling for a deal. In reality, she was taking closed-door meetings across London, working out how to rebuild the connection she'd lost. Because she knew, even if nobody else did yet, that you can't leap forward until you've earned back the ground beneath your feet. And what she discovered during those pitch meetings completely validated the massive pivot she was about to make. She later revealed just how unanimous the industry consensus was, confessing,
There was the time a few years back where I was trying to run so far away from that whole story and say, no, that's not me, this is me. I don't want anything to do with them. And I guess it was like childish rebellion. But I'm thankful that I went through my whole contract with PWL and I met with different record companies to decide who to sign with. None of them helped me because they all said the same thing, which was, we want to do pop album with you.
When the ink finally dried on the Parlophone contract in 1999, the music industry was baffled. This is the legendary British imprint of the Beatles and Radiohead and Blur. What business did they have signing a former soap star whose last album charted at a dismal number 16? But A&R executives Miles Leonard and Jamie Nelson had a counterintuitive read on the situation. They didn't view Kylie as a broken product that needed fixing. They viewed her as a masterpiece that had simply been placed in the wrong frame. The label had one simple request: stop fighting the pop star within. The experimental, trip-hop, and brooding indie guitars of her deconstruction era were banished. And this is where the real story of Fever begins, even though nobody knew it yet. Parlophone understood something the rest of the industry didn't. You can't skip steps in a pop career rebuild. Before Kylie could go anywhere new, she had to go home first. The experimental, boundary-pushing global pop star the world would meet on Fever in 2001, she could only exist if the reconnection happened here. Parlophone recognized that while the mainstream media had temporarily turned its back on Kylie, one demographic had never let her go. Through the late 90s, while Radio 1 playlisted Oasis, the gay clubs of the UK, specifically institutions like GAY at the Astoria in London, had kept her safely elevated on her pedestal. Kylie knew exactly who her true base was. Reflecting on the shift it took to make Light Years, she hit the nail perfectly on the head. She confessed,
"It really has come full circle with me not only accepting my past, but embracing it." And I realized 2.5 years ago, 3, I don't know, not that long ago, that you can run but you can't hide. I'm so thankful for even mistakes I've made. They've all brought me to this point, and this album. And it's been an absolute breeze.
The new album wasn't just going to be a return to the dance floor. It was going to be an unashamed love letter to the very community that had kept her career alive. This wasn't about chasing the future. This was about earning back the right to go there. The creative brief for the studio sessions wasn't bogged down in pretentious music theory or delusions of grandeur. Kylie herself walked into those initial meetings with the various writers and producers and handed them a 3-word mood board. Her exact words for the musical style were poolside, disco, cocktails. It was a flawless visual and sonic aesthetic. To execute it, she enlisted her longtime collaborator Steve Anderson, but the label also threw the doors open to the heaviest hitters in British pop. But the track that actually changed everything arrived completely by accident from across the Atlantic. A young, then unknown songwriter named Cara Dioguardi had co-written a track intended for Paula Abdul's comeback album. And here's the thing about Spinning Around. It was never meant to be a triumphant disco anthem. Abdul actually wrote the lyrics about the painful dissolution of her marriage. Looking back on the track's colossal success in Kylie's hands, Abdul later confessed,
"It's done very well for me, and I'm not complaining at all."
Yes.
It went #1 in every territory, so.
Did you wish you had kept it for yourself?
I have some remorse a little bit about that. And I love the song. It's a fun song. It was written about my divorce a long time ago.
When Abdul's project spectacularly collapsed, the demo found its way into the hands of a UK publisher, who immediately slipped it to Parlophone. And this is the bit nobody talks about. The original demo wasn't a dance anthem at all. It was a sultry, mid-tempo R&B slow jam. British producer Mike Spencer had to completely gut the track's architecture. He significantly bumped the BPM and brought in elite session musicians, players who had worked with Jamiroquai and Lisa Stansfield, to inject that aggressively fast disco funk bassline. The moment Kylie heard this newly turbocharged version of Spinning Around, the whole direction of Light Years clicked into place. The opening lyric, "I'm spinning around, move out of my way," wasn't just a catchy hook. It was a statement of intent. It was the sound of a woman reclaiming her authority over clubland. But Parlophone didn't just want a club hit. They wanted cultural dominance. And for that, they needed to bridge the gap between the gay clubs and the UK Top 40. Enter Robbie Williams and his primary co-writer, Guy Chambers. At the dawn of 2000, Robbie was the undisputed king of British pop, riding the colossal wave of Angels and Let Me Entertain You. Bringing him into the studio was a calculated A&R play. It instantly gave Kylie bulletproof, mainstream credibility. The sessions with Williams and Chambers produced two distinct tracks. The first was the duet Kids, originally penned by Robbie as a solo track for Kylie before he decided he liked it too much to give it away entirely. It provided the necessary radio-friendly pop rock swagger. But the second track they crafted together became the theatrical heart of the entire project. Your Disco Needs You. This is where the creative clashes really kicked off. The fact that Parlophone lost their nerve and refused to release this as a primary UK single remains one of the greatest unpunished crimes in modern pop music. It's a masterclass in unhinged camp. From the bombastic Village People style brass section to the audacious French spoken word bridge, it was practically engineered in a lab to become the official international anthem of homosexuality. And Kylie took that international assignment literally. She actually went back into the vocal booth and recorded that exact same spoken word monologue in German, Spanish, and Japanese. Depending on which country you bought the Light Years CD in, you received a completely different, geographically localized dose of high camp. The label executives feared it was too theatrical for the mainstream. And I will argue until my dying breath that the theatricality was exactly why it connected so deeply. They fought hard against releasing it as a UK single, fearing it would alienate the very Radio 1 audience they were desperately trying to win back. But Kylie, stepping into her power alongside her creative director and close friend William Baker, dug her heels in. Baker's fingerprints are all over Light Years. He was instrumental in steering her away from the moody, defensive posturing of her indie years and pushing her into high-fashion, unapologetic glamour. Together, they understood that you can't court the pink pound while sanitizing the product you're trying to sell. They needed the camp. They needed the strings, the choirs, and the melodrama. The studio sessions for Light Years ultimately became a tug of war. They were balancing the corporate pressure of a label needing to return on their investment with an artist who was finally comfortable in her own sequined skin. Here's the thing about Light Years that I don't think enough people talk about. On the surface, it sounds like a straightforward homage to 1970s Studio 54 excess. But when you dig into the production and isolate the stems, what you're actually listening to is a heavily synthesized Y2K dance record. Kylie and her producers weren't just recreating the past. They were taking the lush, sweeping string arrangements of classic disco and bolting them onto the aggressive, four-to-the-floor house beats dominating European club culture. This wasn't a nostalgic pastiche. It was a neon-lit assault on the senses. And to really get what this record was doing, you have to step away from the polished Radio 1 breakfast show edits and drop yourself straight into a sweaty Soho basement in late 2000. The album works as a perfectly curated DJ set. It takes you through a massive night out, start to finish. Now, I'm not going to bore you by going through every track on the album, but I did want to pick out a few moments that I think are essential to understanding why it works so well. And I'm curious, let's see if your highlights are the same as mine. Right, so if this album is a night out, it starts exactly where every great night out starts. At home, getting ready. Spinning Around isn't just the lead single. It's the sound of the pre-drinks. You're at your friend's place, the mirror's steamed up, someone's hogging the bathroom, and this track is blasting from the speakers while everyone's getting dressed. It's fizzy, it's confident, it's that specific buzz you get when the night hasn't started yet, but you already know it's going to be a good one. The whole song vibrates with anticipation. You're not on the dance floor yet, but you can feel it pulling you there. And once you're out, once you've crossed the threshold into the club, the album shifts gears completely. The track I want to talk about is Butterfly. This is the adrenaline spike of the record for me. Co-written with Steve Anderson, it abandons the traditional pop verse-chorus structure and instead commits entirely to a relentless house beat. It's just pure joy. If you were a teenager navigating the gay scene at the Astoria back then, Butterfly was the exact moment the lights shifted, the bass vibrated through the floorboards, and the club collectively lost its mind. It demands physical movement. It's the sound of Kylie completely letting go. But Kylie understands something about dance music that most people miss. The very best dance records are secretly devastating. She taps into something I think is the secret weapon of all, the crying at the discotheque trope with Disco Down. It's a thumping 70s stomper, wrapping genuine heartbreak inside a soaring bass line. It captures that incredibly specific feeling of dancing through emotional pain, echoing ABBA or Donna Summer at their most heartbreaking. The production glides, but the vocal delivery is laced with real yearning, and underneath the sequins, you can hear that the emotional stakes of this record were sky high. Now, there's one track on this album that I think gets overlooked, and it might be my favorite thing here. If you listen closely to I'm So High, you can hear the connective tissue between the brooding indie girl of 1997 and the pop royalty of 2000. It blends her impossible princess sensibility, that slightly left of center, breathless vocal styling, with this camp, optimistic pop landscape. It's the track that reassured me she hadn't lobotomized her artistry for a chart position. She'd simply learned how to dress her introspection in a much better outfit. And then there's the way she ends it. The title track, Light Years, closes the project by dissolving the traditional boundaries of a pop song entirely. Clearly inspired by Giorgio Moroder's work on I Feel Love, it strips away the bombast and just leaves this pulsating, futuristic wall of synth. And if you're paying attention, this is the moment the whole argument I'm making clicks into place. Because this track doesn't sound like the rest of Light Years. It sounds like Fever. That icy, synthesized, robotic sound she'd fully commit to 12 months later, it's already here. Just wrapped in slightly warmer production, road tested on the audience before she goes all in. She's not just closing an album, she's leaving a breadcrumb. And importantly, this is a co-write, and it's produced by Biff Stannard, who would work more heavily on the Fever album, best known for his work with the Spice Girls. And he and Kylie would go on to write one of my favorite Kylie songs of all time, Love at First Sight. It's a track built for the very end of the night. You close your eyes on the dance floor, put your hands in the air, and just let the synths carry you away. It doesn't just end the album, it launches you into orbit, perfectly setting the stage for the icy, robotic perfection that she would conquer the globe with just 1 year later. Kylie built a record that, and I mean this, bypassed the intellect and aimed straight for the nervous system. Melancholia and relentless momentum all wired together. The stage was set, the trap was laid, now Parlophone just had to execute the rollout. Parlophone had the record, but having a great album and actually convincing the gatekeepers of British pop radio to play it are two entirely different battles. The charts were dominated by teenage heavyweights, and smuggling a 32-year-old pop veteran back onto the Radio 1 A-list required a visual Trojan horse. Kylie and William Baker understood that the aesthetic for the lead single needed to be instantly iconic, effortlessly glamorous, and completely free of the try-hard choreography dominating the top 40. The spinning around video worked because it was so simple. Set in a hazy, neon-drenched nightclub, it stripped away the high-concept angst of her indie years and presented a woman completely in command of her environment. But the thing everyone actually remembers about that video wasn't the lighting or the set design. It was a tiny gold lame garment purchased for 50 pence at a flea market. Those gold hot pants immediately became the most recognizable piece of pop culture iconography of the year 2000. They weren't just a costume. They single-handedly flipped the entire British media narrative overnight. The tabloids, which had spent the previous 2 years predicting her downfall, were suddenly plastered with the images of her effortless return to form. She looked radiant, untouchable, and supremely confident. I remember seeing that video for the first time and thinking, right, she's back. The image was so inescapable that radio programmers had no choice but to fall in line.
Hot pants from I don't know where. They were 50p in a charity store that my girlfriend Katerina Jeb bought for me. My stylist suggested I wear them for this video, and the rest in this instance is history.
Did you ever think that these hot pants would end up behind bulletproof glass in a museum?
No, I didn't. I could not have foreseen the life or the reach of these hot pants. I do remember the fitting, and I was kind of timid. I put them on. I said, well, what do you, I said, they're like, you know, did a little turnaround, this is what they are, and she just said, that's happening. I remember on the video day, red light on, record, do it, do it, do it. Cut. I feel really embarrassed. I also didn't know that she had chosen quite a snug crop. Anyway, by the end of the second day, Modesty was on an extended break. So 50 pence well spent.
When the physical CD single for Spinning Around finally hit the shelves in June, the chart battle wasn't even a contest. The track danced directly into the official UK charts and detonated at #1, giving Kylie her first undisputed chart topper in an entire decade. I cannot tell you how good that felt. The public hadn't fallen out of love with her, they'd simply been waiting for her to invite them back to the dance floor. And here's what people forget. This wasn't just a hit, this was proof of concept. This was Kylie demonstrating to Parlophone, to the industry, and to herself that the audience was still there. Without this moment, without this proof that the dance floor would still show up for her, there's no green light for the creative risks she'd take on Fever. But a single hit does not a comeback make. To ensure the album's legacy, the promotional machine had to move fast. The follow-up, On a Night Like This, doubled down on the sophisticated European house aesthetic, but it was the live execution that sent it into the stratosphere. In October 2000, Kylie stood in the center. Parlophone then deployed their ultimate crossover insurance policy. Kids. Releasing the swaggering Robbie Williams duet as the third single was a smart, tactical move. It bridged the gap between the gay clubs and the traditional British pub rock crowd, getting heavy rotation on mainstream television and cementing her status not just as a dance floor icon, but as universally beloved pop royalty. By the time the flamenco-infused Please Stay rounded out the album's promotional cycle, Light Years had already gone multi-platinum. The rollout was a masterclass in how to bring a pop career back from the dead. There was no desperate scrambling for relevance, no trend chasing the American teen pop sound, and absolutely no apologies. She simply built a glittering, neon-lit universe, stood at the center of it, and waited for the rest of the world to catch up. And by the end of 2000, the rest of the world had. The trust was back. The audience was back. The infrastructure was rebuilt. Now she could afford to take them somewhere they'd never been before. By the spring of 2001, the commercial resurrection was complete. The album had comfortably gone platinum, the singles had decimated the top 40, and Parlophone's massive gamble had paid off handsomely. But a pop star's true authority isn't secured in the recording studio or even on the charts. It's validated in the arenas. And this is where Kylie, alongside William Baker, completely tore up the blueprint for the modern stadium gig. To get why the On a Night Like This tour mattered so much, you have to remember what a standard arena show looked like at the dawn of the millennium. The live circuit was heavily polarized. On one side, you had the sterile, highly athletic headset mic routines of the American teen pop explosion. On the other, the serious, moody band setups of the fading Britpop era. Kylie looked at all of that and went in a completely different direction. She bypassed traditional pop concert tropes and looked instead to the West End, Las Vegas showgirls, the Folies Bergère, and the midnight drag shows of Soho. The resulting production was an outrageously expensive, unapologetically camp theatrical revue. It was less a promotional tour and more a glittering victory parade. When the curtain went up, audiences weren't greeted by a brooding artist hiding behind a microphone stand. They were hit with a tidal wave of sailors, Kylie descending from the rafters on an anchor, Broadway tap routines, and enough feathers to ground a flock of ostriches, all aboard the Love Boat. And rather than giving us a tedious, sequential rundown of her new album tracks, the show was broken into distinct, heavily stylized acts. She took the specific chaotic energy of a 2 a.m. gay club and scaled it up to 15,000-seat arenas. And this is where it all came together, and I saw it with my own eyes. The demographic collision happening right there in the stalls. For the first time in her career, the audience was completely unified. Everyone was collectively losing their minds to the same high camp, feather boa draped spectacular. She didn't tone down the gay aesthetic to make the crowds comfortable. She invited the straight world into the gay club, handed them a sequined captain's hat, and dared them not to have the time of their lives. It was one of the best live shows I'd ever seen, and 25 years later, I still haven't changed my mind. although the Tension tour came pretty close. The global box office receipts for the On a Night Like This tour were staggering, requiring multiple date extensions and instantly selling out venues across the UK and Australia. But the financial success is only half the story. The lasting impact ran much deeper. Kylie proved to an incredibly cautious music industry that camp was not a commercial liability. You didn't need to be edgy, angry, or tragically sad to be taken seriously as a massive touring force. Joy, glamour, and theatrical absurdity had real quantifiable value. She set a new baseline for the pop spectacle. She took the underground sensibilities of drag culture, backed them with massive corporate funding, and created a safe, euphoric space on a scale that hadn't existed before. The tour didn't just entertain, it changed the expectation of what a British arena show could feel like in the 21st century. And it gave Kylie something she hadn't had since the PWL days, a live show template that actually worked at scale. Every costume change, every theatrical set piece, every piece of staging that made Fever 2002 one of the most celebrated pop tours of all time, the DNA of all of that starts here, on this tour, in these arenas. Here's what frustrates me. Fever gets the credit. Fever gets the retrospectives. Fever gets called the comeback. And every time I hear that, I think, no. Fever was what happened after the comeback. Fever was what became possible once the hard work was already done. Light Years closed the gap. It repaired the bond with the gay clubs that had kept her alive. It proved to Parlophone, to Radio 1, and to the British public that Kylie Minogue still owned the dance floor. It gave her a #1 single, a multi-platinum album, and a touring template that would become the foundation for one of the greatest pop spectacles of all time. It's the exact moment she stopped apologizing for her own brilliance. And once she stopped apologizing, she was free. Free to take the warmth of Light Years, strip it back to cold, robotic precision, and deliver the most globally dominant pop record of the early 2000s. But none of that happens without this album. Before the year 2000, the industry was convinced that youth was the only viable currency. Light Years took that apart. It proved something I've believed ever since, that lived experience, visual authority, and an unbreakable bond with your core demographic will always outlast temporary teen pop trends. And it proved it with the sales figures to back it up. You don't get Can't Get You Out of My Head without spinning around, clearing the way first. You don't get the icy confidence of Fever without the warm reconnection of Light Years. You don't get world domination without first earning back your own kingdom. And if you bought this album in 2000, if you played it to death that summer, you already know everything I've just said. But acknowledging the sheer force of this Y2K rebirth also forces a much bigger, far more controversial conversation. When you strip away the nostalgia and place this golden era directly alongside the billion-dollar juggernaut of Fever, the slick, synth-pop perfection of Aphrodite, and the brooding, misunderstood ambition of Impossible Princess, you start to see the full picture of her legacy. You have to look at it all to understand where her real genius sits. And I've done exactly that. So out of 16 studio albums spanning nearly 4 decades of pop supremacy, which Kylie Minogue record actually claims the #1 spot on my list? Click here to find out.